Hey, this week we're back with George Eisenhart Sr., and we're talking some more about his drag racing career. Hey, we're back with George Eisenhart Sr. Last week we talked about kind of how he started running racetracks and how he was a drag racer, and he ended up owning some racetracks and running them, and we had some stories about some of his sideshow entertainment failures and some successes. So you said you've had some other experiences with guys like Connie Coletta and some of them. Tell us some of those kind of experiences.
Well, Connie Coletta was a top fuel racer, and he was a good one. He was extremely smart, and he was also a pilot. And one time we had a match race between a couple of funny cars planned for a Sunday afternoon, and it was raining. And one of the cars that I had planned on being there had raced the night before on Saturday night and blown the engine, and it wasn't going to be able to race. Well, the rain stopped. Now I had one car and nobody to race him. And the phone rang and it was Connie Coletta. He said, "Hey, I know you're short a car." He said, "I can be there in about an hour." And he said, "I've done the weather check, and you're going to have good enough weather you can get it in." At that time, we didn't think we were going to get the race in. And sure enough, Connie come in and we had a match race. And of course, anytime you have a rainy day before the event starts, the crowd is down. Mm-hmm. So I lost my shirt, but we at least had a good race from Connie. but Connie has always been the type of racer. He'll make the car run as hard as it'll run. He will not try to save the motor. He'll pour nitro to it till it blows his brains out. Mm-hmm. But many years later, I was learning to fly a plane, and I was getting checked out for my license. And I knew Connie had been a long-time pilot, and we were at a national drag race at Indianapolis, and I was talking with Connie, and he didn't look so good. His eyes looked very bloodshot. He said he'd been flying. He flew a lot of freight at that time. He was flying freight for Ford Motor Company parts, and he said, "Look, I got a run coming up here in the next few minutes. If you want to go with me, you get some time in the seat flying, you know." I said, "Well, that'd be great." I went with him. We jumped in the plane. It was a twin-engine Cessna. It was called a Riley Rocket. It had a Riley conversion on it of turbochargers, and it was way before that was as common as it is today. And he was in the left seat, which was the pilot in command. I was in the right side. We take off, and I'm just thinking, this is wonderful. I'm watching all the gauges and learning about it. Now, I could fly a single-engine plane, but I was still a student. I was a long way from having my license. And at that, we get up and we level off, and Connie starts to get out of the seat. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm going to go in the back and sleep because I've been flying all night. I can't fly anymore." I said, "Well, who's going to fly the plane?" He says, "You are." I go, "I can't fly a twin." He said, "Yeah, same thing as the single. It's just got two motors. It's no big deal." And well, I was scared out of my bean. And sure enough, he went back and piled on the parts and went to sleep. I mean, I would have been scared to let some student pilot get behind the wheel of my airplane. But that's Connie. And of course, I grew up quite a bit on that one. And then of course, he went on to become extremely successful in the flying service business. Mm-hmm. But he was a very good friend. I think it was Bucky Newsom, who was the VP of Ford Motor Company for a long time. And he got a lot of freight business from Ford because of it, and Ford also gave him motors for a while. He ran Ford engines in his top fuel dragster for a period of time.
Okay. So now, a few years ago, you were honored to get inducted into a drag racing Hall of Fame. Tell me a little bit about that, or tell the fans a little bit about that.
Well, actually, a good friend of mine had a top fuel dragster, and he was on the committee for the for the Hall of Fame committee, and he knew me from the time we were teenagers, and I sold him his first supercharger, and we put it on a '56 Ford with a Cadillac motor in it, and so he recommended me for the Hall of Fame because I'd run 5 racetracks, and I had a long career in it, and I had set a national record when I raced, and I had to give up my racing to take over the racetracks, and I always missed it. I always was sorry. Not sorry that I did it, but I really missed not racing. And so they inducted me in the Drag Racing Hall of Fame along with a number of other people from the East.
Okay.
Arlen Vanke was one. He raced in Akron. He made Akron quite famous from racing it, and the Arfons, and we all got inducted in the Hall of Fame. That's been 5 years ago now.
Okay. Now, a few years back, well, it's been quite a few years back, you got involved in boat racing. So, and I remember hearing stories from Junior about he got to go and be one of the pilots with you a couple races, and that was pretty exhilarating. But talk a little bit about your boat racing experience.
Well, I had a boat, and when I wasn't running the racetrack during the week, we pleasure boated, and it was, of course, my racing background. I was always monkeying with it, trying to make it go faster, and I got it to go pretty good. And they had a boat race that came to Cleveland in Lake Erie, and I was there to watch the boat race. And as the racers were going outbound from the harbor at speed, I went along outbound, not on the race course, but obviously you're in the lake. And I saw that I could keep up pretty good. And I thought, well, heck, I ought to be able to do this. So the next thing you know, we had a race boat. I bought a boat, and we built a motor for it, and we started racing. And we found out it wasn't nearly as easy as we thought it was going to be. But I really got a buzz out of it. And the same 3 guys that helped me on my race car and during my racing career at the drag strip helped me on their boat. And we had a pretty good run with it. We had 10 years of racing it. We won the Great Lakes Championship 3 times, National Championship twice, and the World Championship once. I'm going to have this. Okay.
You want a sip of this?
Yeah. What about the Jack?
I don't think I backwashed it. So.
It's like one of those things you can take anything. Christ. Got to keep your eyes closed. It's a goddamn ugly.
This is a week 2 intro.
Christ, I hope we can edit this thing.
Oh, it's Davey's got it.
Okay. So, do you want to talk any more about the boat stuff, or do you want to leave that ride and go somewhere?
We're good. We're good.
Okay, so after the boat stuff, I mean, you still tinker with that a little bit, but you also like to build hot rods. You just built a street rod for your daughter, Jody. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, my daughter had been looking at the family albums and pictures, and I had built a lot of street rods over the years that we had built. And she was on me about why didn't I keep one of them for her. She wanted one, and I had sold them all. Of course, when you first get married, you got to get rid of that kind of stuff because you're now going to have a family and a house payment and all that sort of thing, as you're familiar with. And I was looking at the calendar, and I got to thinking I was coming up in the late 60s. I better get started on this hot rod because it takes a while to build one. And so I did. I built her a hot rod, and she bought all the parts for it, and I built the hot rod. It's a T-bucket, and it's got a highly modified 351 Ford Windsor engine in it, and all the right stuff, and it goes good. And she brought it back to me last summer, and she said, "Dad, the hot rod's got a little bit of a shimmy in it on the front end." I said, really? I said, at what speed? She said, 90. I said, 90? She says, yeah, it's a little bit of a shake at 90. And I said, do you drive it at 90 that much? She says, well, it stopped shimmying over 90. And sure enough, I checked the front wheels, and it had thrown off a wheel weight off one of the front wheels.
Mm-hmm.
But the nut doesn't fall far from the tree. She's got a heavy foot like I do, and she loves it, you know. So, and I've just finished another T-bucket for a friend of mine that back in the years ago, he bought my old race car and went racing with it until the Marines called him, and that was the end of his racing career too. So, yeah, we still do cars. I do a lot of pickup trucks and that sort of thing.
Well, hopefully you guys are enjoying these stories with George. Next week we're going to talk about George Jr. and hit that like button and subscribe. And you guys know the routine. We'll see you next week.